Greetings, my name's Guy Dauncey, and this is a show called Change the World, where if you've been a regular viewer, you'll know I like to invite people on who share my passion for a positive, visionary future, for big ideas, for big solutions, and who have got no patience for whining and moaning. My guest today is Corey Berger, who is very active with the Greater Victoria Cycling Coalition. In fact, you are the Policy and Infrastructure Chair, which sounds like the most important stuff there is, right?
A little bit. It's I do a lot of the advocacy stuff.
Yeah, and you've been cycling professionally and personally for more than a decade.
Yes.
And you work for a local research company with a focus on transportation as well, and live in Esquimalt with your family, right? So,
yes.
How long have you been cycling altogether?
Well, I remember my parents and my grandparents teaching me to cycle at the top of Yale Street near Oak Bay when I was 4 or 5.
That's about the age when I started, yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be about the age everyone started, and I like to say that I've got 2.5 to 3 decades of cycling to and from school or work.
Yes.
So
Oh, wow.
got lots of experience in that.
Yeah. Becomes second nature, right?
It does. I mean, there's the old joke about riding a bicycle, but it really is.
Yes.
So I just spent a month away actually on my honeymoon, and it was amazing. I didn't ride a bike the whole time I was away, and I came back and you just hop on and just like that, it comes back. So.
And does your new wife, congratulations, does she ride?
She does, a little bit. So I mean, she's a good example of what they would call that interested but concerned group of people who ride occasionally, but not every day. So,
yeah. So before we get into the whole vision for what cycling can mean, what's your take on electric bikes?
I think they're fantastic. I mean, it's been, if you talk to people who have electric bikes, if you've got to go a little bit further, if you've got to carry a little more stuff, if you're older and, maybe your knees don't work as well, maybe you live at the top of a hill.
Yeah.
Electric bikes have been, it's been a game changer. I was in Seattle a few years ago, and there's this woman dressed very elegantly in a dress, calmly going up the giant hills of Seattle, and and of course, what's on the back of her bike but an e-assist motor, and it meant that she wasn't in a motor vehicle. She was now able to ride on a regular bike.
I say to people, I'll speak at these meetings, and I'll say to people, how many of you have been on an electric bike? And 3 hands will go up, and I say, well, we're all in a club together, because we know that when you get an electric bike, you destroy the laws of gravity. You can cycle up that hill, and there's no leg pain, there's no exhaustion.
No. But I mean, the interesting thing about e-bikes is that when someone actually figured out, they looked at their exertion level and stuff like that. So if you're talking about health benefits of biking, it's pretty similar.
You can choose. I was on one recently, the Pedigo, and you can set, do you want 10% personal effort or 90%?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, so if you do it, I mean, if you've got, another kid in your cargo bike and, you've got to go a little further, you just turn it up a little bit more. But maybe today, it's lighter, you can turn it down. I must admit,
if you're really ancient, then 100% electric bike is fine.
Yeah.
Otherwise, a bit of pedaling is.
Well, absolutely, and it's it's your choice on how much you do. And one of the challenges with electric bikes in BC actually is, so if I go out, if I want to go buy an electric car, a Leaf or something similar, the province is going to give me a discount. They're going to give me some money back for that. If I go out and buy an electric bike, not only are they not going to give me any money for it, they're also going to charge me PST on that purchase.
Yeah.
Which, if I buy a regular bike, I don't get charged PST.
That's a policy issue which needs a fix, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's holding people back because a good electric bike is a couple of grand.
I've seen that price, yes.
And it's not as much as a car. It is really a car replacement. That's what some research found out of the US. But it's we do need that government support to say, you know what, electric bikes are great. Electric cars are great. We also need electric bikes. We also need electric transport as well.
And the amount of electricity needed for the bikes is effectively zero.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably generate it sitting on another bike.
So I moved to Victoria from England in 1990.
Yeah.
And I was cycling around then. There were no bike lanes. There were no painted lanes on the road. It was just look at a map, find out which is the quietest road, and go for it.
Yeah.
Now, because I live up near Nanaimo, I come down and I think, whoa, this is really changing.
I mean, it's pity. I mean, today actually I was up at the Traffic Safety Commission meeting, which is near the oldest bike lane in the region up near Sandwich Commonwealth Place.
Yes.
And then I rode down the Goose and down the Lochside and onto one of the newest bike lanes because I work at Pandora and Quadra.
Right, okay.
So it was a good sort of history of biking in Victoria across a couple of kilometers.
And I recall that if it wasn't for the activism coming out of the Greater Victoria Cycling Coalition and leaders like Denise Savoy, who's a city councillor as well, who helped to make the Galloping Goose happen and the Lochside Trail happen, we could still be like the cities that have just got painted lanes and painted lines, and that's all, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the GVCC has been involved in nearly every infrastructure project advocating for it since the beginnings of the Goose and the regional trail.
So it means that when the planners are sitting down, they've got the cyclists at the table with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's something we do. We actually sit down a lot with engineers and planners now directly, even prior to
Yes.
you know, it becoming a big public engagement thing, and say, you know, this is what we like to see, and this is what we're interested in.
So talk about the difference between a road with a white line painted on it and a separated bike lane. And we've got some images we'll show of separated bike lanes. Why is it so important to spend more money for a separated bike lane?
It's a couple of things. So there's sort of the safety aspect. So if you're providing a physical barrier between the bicycle and the person driving, it's safer. That means that, you know, I was looking at the City of Victoria's crash statistics. Something like 10% of the crashes happen rear end crashes, which are completely eliminated with a protected bike lane.
Right.
And, you know, a painted bike lane, drivers will still occasionally use it as a parking zone or things like that. And then there's also the comfort factor as well. You're now providing that physical barrier.
Yes.
So one of the key things we know for biking is that people not only need to be safe, they also need to feel safe.
Yeah.
And so the protection affords them that feeling of safety and actual safety in both aspects.
I remember Simon Whitfield, who's our Olympic gold medalist triathlete, telling he was cycling on a white line, and an SUV with a mirror, this came wide, commuting home when it should be like 50, doing 70, 80, clipped him on the side, and he's a top-notch athlete, and he got knocked off his bike. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I saw today a good friend of mine who's ridden for I don't know how many years. She was doored today on a road downtown. It's like, so it's only a matter of time, really, unfortunately, right now when you're riding in the unprotected bike lanes, that you're going to have an incident like that. And it's, you know, I mean, it's been a game changer, the protected bike lanes downtown, not only in the number of people using them, because we've certainly seen that, but also who is using them. I work on it, I get to ride it every day. Yeah. And it's just, you know, I'm now seeing kids, like young kids, are riding on their own bicycles. Yes. I see kids 14, 15 by themselves riding, which I would never have seen prior to the bike lane installation. Yeah.
So looking ahead, we know that Copenhagen sets one of the benchmarks. They're aiming at 50% of all trips to work and college and school by bike. What's your vision for Victoria? Not the city's vision, what's your vision for Victoria?
You know what, I think we could get to 40 or 50% within the city. I mean, it's, your challenge is distance beyond that, but absolutely.
You've got the battery to switch on, remember, for distance?
Absolutely, I mean, that's one of the things they see. One of the Danish studies found that, you know, your average person in Denmark biked a couple of kilometers, 3 or 4, I think it was, but your average person on electric assist now bikes 7. Yeah. So that's opening up 7 kilometers is the distance between downtown and UVic. So now someone could easily do downtown to UVic on an e-bike and back. Yes.
And not worry about Falby Hill.
Exactly, or, you know, Dean, or I mean, even the smaller hills you don't have to worry about. So and it means they can again carry a little bit more when they need to do that. Yeah. So yeah, I think we could easily get to 40 or 50% mode share. It's going to take a little bit of time. I mean, it's going to take networks. I mean, what we see is that, you know, Pandora got built, opened last year, and the traffic on the Goose increased about 10%. Wow. Then the Johnson Street Bridge opened, and it was, you know, in April the bike lanes tend to get busier. Weather gets better. Yes. But this year, it was like someone lit a rocket underneath it. You know, April came around, mid-April, everyone started riding again because, oh yeah, the weather's better, and now we're up 30%. May was 30% year-over-year growth, which is unheard of. The only place you see that kind of growth in transportation infrastructure is on new rail lines in places like in the States or like in Vancouver, and in traffic in the West Shore because it's growing so quickly.
So I've read in the studies of cycling that for every dollar invested in bicycle infrastructure, you're saving $5 in other costs, whether it's healthcare issues or stress or. Why don't people understand? Because there's a resistance. There's clearly resistance to the bike lanes, but they seem to be incredibly. Everyone on a bicycle is not in a car, effectively, or not, not on the bus. So they're doing a favor for everyone.
I think some of it is resistance to change. I mean, you look at a street like Pandora, and if you took a photo of it 50 years ago, and you took a photo of it prior to the construction of the protected bike lane, not much would have changed on that street. You know, so in many people's lifetimes, I mean, a good example of that, I saw a picture of Oak Bay and Foul Bay Road from the 1970s. And if you went out there today, the road would look identical to what it was in the 1970s. So for many people, for their entire lifetime,
they're just used to that.
That's what it is, and it's changed.
Yeah.
It is also, I mean, you are reapportioning a portion of the roadway to a bike lane.
Yes.
That is narrowing some of the sections down. So that means that, you know, maybe you can't do 55 or 60 down on downtown street. Now you actually have to do 40, the speed limit.
Yes.
So I think that's some of it. And then, you know, the other thing is the city spends a lot of money on infrastructure, you know, in the region as a whole spends, you know, hundreds of millions on infrastructure every year. But a lot of that is very quiet. It's the replacing of telephone poles, it's swapping out signals, it's doing curbs, stuff that really doesn't make the news, it's not exciting, council doesn't vote on it, you know, as whereas bike lanes, they do. They vote on it, they talk about it. Groups like ours are out there encouraging people to support it. So I think that's part of the reason why it's change, and then, you know, the fact that it is very, very public spending of dollars. So,
what are the roads you'd most like to see new separated bike lanes on?
I think, I mean, Wharf Street's the next one that's coming up for the city. That's going to be fantastic. Again, that's going to link into, you know, Johnson Street Bridge and all that. Beyond that, you know, the city has talked about where they're going to go next with their network. The reality is most of the growth in bike lane network is going to be in the city of Victoria, because that's where most of the cyclists are. You know, the really key quadrant that's kind of missing a good alternative route is Burnside Gorge. So, you know, one of our focuses right when the first Biketoria plan came out was actually government and gorge, because there isn't a good alternative. Like, for example, if I'm riding on Fairfield, I could also ride on Richardson.
Yes, you can.
If I'm riding on Vancouver, I can also ride on Cook, or vice versa.
Well, I used to ride on Burnside Road because I lived in West Sandwich. That was my main commute into downtown.
And, you know,
it was aggressive.
Yeah, and if you're up on Haltane, you know, there's Bay Street. Like, there's two roads, whereas up on Burnside and Gorge, there's really only the main roads there. So if you want to come into town to a portion that isn't downtown, because you can get on the Goose, sort of, you have to go along Burnside or Gorge. So I think that's a key part, is connecting that in, because I know Sandwich is interested in doing pieces there as well.
So this show airs all the way from Parksville down to Victoria. What's your advice for, say, a community like Duncan, which is really just getting started on decent cycling infrastructure?
I mean, the great thing about a small community like Duncan, or, I mean, you know, my parents live up near Merritt, is that it's not all that expensive to install it when your parking pressures are low, you don't have a huge number of vehicles. You know, you could easily do, you know, with, you know, a few tens of thousands of, you know, matched by the province, do some sort of a pilot downtown, push the parking around and do some paint on the ground, and just see what it would look like if you actually went out and did. And there's cities in the US that have done this. They've gone out and they've striped whole networks overnight, temporarily, you know, as a month or multiple month pilot. So, you know, it doesn't need to be, you don't need to pour a lot of concrete. You do in downtown Victoria, because you've got a lot of parking pressures, it's a big city, you've got to look at, you know, but in a small town, you don't necessarily need to do that. So.
And how important is the role of an activist organization of citizens like the Cycling Coalition in making things happen?
It's quite important. I mean, I was talking to UVic has got a class talking about Biketoria, and I was talking to them, and I sort of explained that there's sort of the three groups that get, you know, getting things done. There's your staff, there's your politicians, and then there's your active citizens, right? So it's active groups like ours, but also people who are actively interested, people like yourself, who are saying, you know, let's do these things. And it's important that you have all three groups on side, moving towards a single goal, because any one of the three can basically stall progress, and that's something we've seen in the region here. Is that unless everyone's on side pulling towards the same goal, not much is going to
So let me play devil's advocate for a minute and speak as the voice for people who say that cyclists have got no road sense, they go the wrong way on the sidewalks, they behave atrociously, they should all get ticketed, all bikes should be licensed and stuff like that. Is it guilty as charged, or is it a nuanced?
Well, so everything I've read about cycling safety says that just about everybody breaks the rules on the road at just about the same rate. It doesn't matter whether you're sitting behind a wheel of a car, leaning on handlebars, or walking, you know. The difference is what the consequences for those failures. Because generally, if you're walking or biking, the failure of your particular actions is going to be borne by you. Whereas someone who's driving,
Could be someone else.
their failures. And that's what they saw. So the city of Vancouver went out and did a cycling safety study 6 years ago now. And what they found was that they looked at all the crashes and they said, who's primarily at fault? And what they found is of 50% of the crashes, those are the ones they could find blame for.
Yes.
93% were the fault of the driver, usually failing to yield right of way.
Right.
So, that means the driver might have turned left in front of a cyclist or T-boned a cyclist,
Yes.
or the driver turns right, especially at bike lanes. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the GVCC pushed so hard for the lights on Pandora,
Yes.
was because we knew from other parts of the world that you absolutely need to keep those right-hand turning drivers separated from the people going straight
And is that why it's important when at the stop line, when the bike lane stop line is advanced?
Absolutely.
So the motorists can see the cyclist.
And there was a very tragic case in Ottawa where a woman unfortunately was killed. She went underneath the wheels of a dump truck last year on a protected bike lane, unsignalized protected bike lane.
Right.
And part of the reason was that the stop lines weren't quite in the right place.
Yeah.
So the dump truck driver claimed, and it's actually in court right now, claimed that he didn't see her.
Yes.
And very tragic circumstance. I mean, it's again an argument for if you have a lot of people turning right, you need to signalize, you need to separate out those phases, because that's what makes people safe. Basically,
So
keep people separated by time or space.
You and I grew up cycling as kids, and so you just learn as you go along. We probably never attended any training course.
I have actually a couple of times. It's actually been really useful.
So give a pitch on the value of a training course for someone who's thinking, well, I'd like to be a cyclist, but I'm not good enough, or I'm nervous.
The real value is confidence. You're going to go out there and you're going to be able to ask those questions. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't know the rules for everything. You've been a driver, but maybe you don't know. When can I pass on the right? When can I not pass on the right? Where should I be in the lane? On a road that's has no bike lane. When can I exit the bike lane? When should I exit the bike lane?
Yes.
And having the ability to ask the instructor those questions is so valuable.
Right.
Plus, you're in a group environment with other people who are probably in the same place as you, so you can grow with them.
Right.
And that's something that I'm also on the board of Bike to Work Week. That's something we see as Bike to Work Week as part of the skills courses. That people come out with that sense of confidence, and that allows them to ride more essentially.
So am I right that Bike to Work Week was a much bigger event this year than previously?
Oh, it was huge this year. It was.
What's happened?
They built new bike lanes. Is basically what it boils down to. We were actually chatting about the statistics just afterwards, and I mean, to give you one statistic. So last year we printed 2,000 ballots. This year we printed 3, and we ran out halfway through them.
And a ballot is?
A ballot for each person coming to a station to fill out the ballot. To fill out. So
Yes.
this year we had double the number of ballots filled out. So just that example. And we also changed up where we went. One of the places we went is actually at the end of the Johnson Street Bridge, right there.
Yes.
So, this year's Bike to Work Week was, insane.
And what about the annual contest between the driver and the cyclist? Who can get there first? How's that working out?
That is almost always won by the cyclist. Doesn't matter where you go. I mean, Vancouver is the same thing. It's pretty much always won, because when you're looking at an urban situation of a couple of kilometers, the reality is that a person on a bike is almost always going to beat a person in a car.
Yes.
Once you factor in the time to walk to your vehicle wherever it's parked, park your vehicle wherever you need to, and then walk to your door. So your door-to-door time is very different.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people think, oh, it's only 10 minutes driving, but then I'm also spending 5 minutes looking for parking, and maybe I'm spending a couple of minutes going down.
At what distance do the cars begin to win?
Usually about 7 to 8 is where it is. I mean, it's a little less if you're. I mean, it depends on where you're going too.
So from downtown Victoria, if this table's down, how far is 7 to 8 kilometers reach?
7 to 8 kilometers from downtown Victoria is UVic, is VGH, is sort of that section of View Royal. So So that'll give you, if you're riding, your average person rides, 4 or 5.
Yes.
That'll easily get you into all of the city of Victoria and the immediate surrounding areas of Saanich and essentially all the streetcar suburbs, right? So.
Yeah, and a friend of mine, Rick Cool, who teaches at Royal Roads, cycles from James Bay to Royal Roads all the time, every day, and he's got his route down just perfect, so he's safe and dandy the whole time, right?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing for those kinds of distances is that's actually really about riding to transit. If you look at places like the Netherlands and Denmark, those people, what they're doing is they live in smaller towns in these sort of outlying suburbs, and they ride to a train station.
Okay.
And then they
And you could
park their
park your
bike,
bike.
and then they hop on the train. And that's exactly what we could easily do
Right.
here as well. You know, Langford is building out a network of bike lanes. You know,
Yes.
imagine if you could ride from, say, the West Hills to the West Hills station, you know,
Yes.
roll down the hill, it's a kilometer, park your bike at a West Hills station and hop on a commuter rail in.
How big an issue is bike theft when you've parked that bike?
Huge.
Is it growing or is it steady or?
I don't know. So the GVCC runs lockers for BC Transit, and
Yeah.
we get in requests fairly regularly, about 1 or 2 a week, and most of those requests are for downtown locations.
Yeah.
So people who, like my bike is at my work because I was
Yes.
just able to leave it and walk over here. But you know, if you rode downtown and you don't work downtown,
Yeah.
then where do you leave your bicycle? Like we need to provide spaces for people whose employers can't do it or who aren't riding
So
for work.
obviously, do you have any insight into what's happening behind the scenes, behind the bike theft business? Business is not the right word to call it, but
Well, in some ways it is a business. You know, stripping off bikes are quite valuable because they're easy to move and they're relatively, it's hard to know. I mean, some of it's certainly bound up in some of the social and housing issues we're having in the city. I mean, I work on Pandora Street.
yeah.
I see it every day.
Yes.
You know, I've had a bike stolen on Pandora Street.
But they got to, so when they're selling it, there's got to be a network into which that bike is going.
Absolutely, and I know I think it was Toronto a few years ago, they busted, a chop shop of bikes. They were just pulling in bikes by the dozens. And it was actually a gentleman who was a well-known mechanic and ran a shop, so he was sort of ran a...
So what about the tiny, I'm picturing nano-sized GPS systems that you can hide on the bike, which get stolen with the bike, and then they go straight to the chop shop and the police can knock on the door.
I mean, that can help, but most of the bike share systems have those already.
Okay.
And they do, you still need to have the police resources to go and chase those down.
Yes.
And so the question is, are you solving the problem, or are you just patching over the Band-Aid for the wound underneath?
Well, if you make it that the people running the chop shops know they're going to get caught, you're going to suppress.
Absolutely, but I mean, you have to look at the motivation for why people are stealing in the first place, and that's the question I don't know. I mean, I suspect some of it is the drug.
I mean, I always rode a bike that was 20 years old, beautiful one, but not a target for theft, so I never had a bike stolen.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you're probably a minority in the city. If you ride a bike regularly, you're going to have one stolen eventually.
Yeah.
So, and that's where the secure lockup at the end really comes in, and the secure lockup sort of at each.
Because the police will do bait cars.
Yeah, and they do bait bikes as well. And I mean, the one thing that this Vic PD have done that's been very successful and has been very successful in Vancouver is registering bikes.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, one of the licensing arguments comes up was about theft. Well,
yes.
The easy way to sort of, you know, deal with that argument is to say, well, let's voluntarily register bikes. And as a consequence, bikes are more like, because a lot of bikes get picked up. They get stolen, they get used, they get sold, and then they get picked up again. So if they're registered, they're more likely to find their way back to their owners.
Right. Yeah.
And I know in Vancouver with 529 Garage, they've had a huge success in actually dropping the number of bike thefts because they know that the bikes are
so the bike shops that are selling the bikes could throw that in as a package.
Absolutely, and it's something that, you know, bike shops would...
When you register a bike, how do you do it?
So you go down to Vic PD and you give them the serial number and you give them who you are as a person, and you say, this is my bike, and you hand in their form to them. And then that gets logged in their database.
Okay.
And then if it comes back in, they look up your serial number and they give you a call.
So could a bike shop act as an agent for Vic PD? So you register at the bike shop?
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, they could have the forms there. I mean, the GVCC has had the forms, you know, at our booths and various events, and we hand them out to people and say, you know, fill these out and take these.
Because whenever everyone's buying a bike from somewhere secondhand on you, that's the moment to register it on the spot, right?
Yeah, and I think the challenge is from the bike store's perspective. That's another piece of work that's not, especially in the summer months. I mean, they're very busy, and it's a very
I gather that, and I gather they struggle in the winter months.
Yeah, I mean, biking, you know, doubles in volume in the winter and summer. So that's when people are going to bring out their old rusty clunkers from the basement.
So I gather from the data that among the benefits of cycling, the increased health, the fitness, is happiness. That cyclists report being happier.
Yes, they certainly do.
Why?
I have absolutely no idea. It's a really interesting question that I'm sure many, many psychology researchers are going to dive into. I mean, I mean, on my bicycle, on a good day, it takes me 18 minutes to get to work. On a bad day, it takes me 20.
Okay, so that's a functional reason.
Yeah, so it's from a functional perspective, from functional happiness, I don't deal with traffic congestion.
Yes.
The only thing that really happens to me is the bridge goes up, and that slows me down.
Yeah.
So I don't have to wait for a bus that might be full and I might not have a seat. I'm not going to be stuck in traffic like a person driving in. Like, you know, I see the West Shore, I see the CFB traffic go by my house twice a day. You know, and I'm relatively fast, so I'm not like as slow as someone who's walking. So, you know, because people walking also report fairly high levels of happiness as well.
Right. So then there's the difference between walking and cycling and being in a car is obviously the fresh air.
Yes.
You're not protected in this cocoon of metal and stuff like that.
You can talk to people. I mean, the social connections. I mean, almost every day when I go out for a ride, you meet enough people in this region. I'm sure you have the same thing. You end up bumping into somebody you know, and you have maybe
you can stop and chat. In a car,
absolutely.
you can't do that.
Or you can, you know, at the very least, wave and say hello as you go by, right? And that's a super. And many times I've stopped at businesses for the same reason.
Your brain chemistry is getting a little bump of oxytocin each time that happens.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like getting 10 likes on Facebook all the same time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a real person, not just.
I think for, you know, if you're talking about kids, a bicycle is their first taste of freedom, if you think about it.
Right, yes.
You know, you are now on a vehicle which you control 100%. You're not on, you know, on your parents' car. It's faster than walking. You can now get somewhere in a reasonable period of time, and you don't have to wait for a bus and have bus passes and all that stuff. So there's.
So I got data from Copenhagen, which said they interviewed people, what are their reasons for cycling.
Yeah.
53% is simply it's faster.
Yeah.
50% it's easier. 40% for the exercise, 27% said it's cheaper, 23% convenient, and guess how many because it's environmentally friendly?
No, about
7% only.
Yeah.
So it's a personal benefit people are going after.
Absolutely, and there was actually a more recent study out of Copenhagen that just came out a couple of days ago, and basically, I mean, the reason why people bike in the Netherlands and Amsterdam is the same reason why people drive in North America, because it's convenient.
The easiest way to get from A to B, right.
And, you know, that's why people complain, I mean, talking about pushback to bike lanes, why people complain about the loss of parking. Because we're a city that's small enough that in many places you can find a parking spot directly in front of the place you're going.
Yeah, so you've been spoilt.
Yeah, until sort of 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Now we're now a big enough city where that's not true anymore.
Yeah, I learn when I'm driving to go to the parkade.
Exactly.
And not drive around the block 6 times looking for that space.
But many people will drive around the block 6 times looking for that. So that's.
We need to wind up. But so in your time as a volunteer with the Cycling Coalition, what are your joyful moments that really stand out for you?
I've got to say, it's when you see people riding on the new pieces of bike lane, or you know, wherever it is, downtown, et cetera, and you see just the joy, the sheer joy in the, you know, talking about that.
Yes.
Especially on the kids' faces, and you know, downtown Pandora, you know, to have kids riding by in a downtown environment is unheard of.
And do you get that quiet feeling like I was part of making that happen?
Yes, but I also, you know, you also have to be realistic. Say, you know, I'm just part of the, you know, the group, right?
Yes.
I'm just someone amplifying other people's voices.
All city council, all the planners, all the engineers.
Absolutely, and it's more than that. It's all the like, you know, when we put out a call for Wharf Street, almost everyone who sent an email into council talked about riding downtown with their kids or planning to ride downtown.
Well, look, Corey, thank you for being a volunteer on all this, for all the leadership and the fun and the joy you're bringing to the city. It's great, right?
Awesome.
So my name has been Guy Dauncey. My name still is Guy Dauncey. This is the show Change the World. One of my small contributions is this novel called Journey to the Future. A Better World is Possible, set in Vancouver in the year 2032, when everyone is enjoying a Copenhagen level of cycling and how it works for people and how much joy it brings. So big breath. If you enjoy a show like this, tune in next week for more scintillating discussions, and thanks for watching.